Davey, how you doing?
I'm good, Rob. How you going, man?
I'm doing some last minute audio adjustments here. It's not starting off well. Welcome to the show, everyone. And before the lock, we are on episode number 21. Super exciting. Today we're going to be talking about all things homebrew.
Yes.
We had an awesome show at Expo, learned about a bunch of new homebrew stuff, and figured we'd keep that train going, right?
Yeah, amazing section at Homebrew. Amazing homebrew section at Expo this year. Bigger than it's ever been before. A big structure around it, signs, more machines than they've ever had at any other show, and it was just amazing. Lots of great things came out of it.
For sure. And before we get to that, so Davey, if our audience watches this show, they know that you've had a little bit of a pinball buying habit this year. Evil Dead, are you in? Are you in on Evil Dead?
Well, I wasn't in for about 48 hours, and then
here we go.
So I'm really proud of myself. Usually it takes a lot sooner for me to cave, but yeah, I caved, man. I'm sorry to say.
Nice.
I think it looks amazing. I think the artwork by French is just mind-blowingly good. I think it's the best he's ever done. I like Spooky as a company, man. I think that they've sort of, they hold a very special place in my heart. Scooby I bought, but probably wasn't that in love with, as all things considered. Looney Tunes and Texas Chainsaw I was never in love with because I really dislike games where they do double themes. So I'll never buy a sort of a double theme game. I think it sort of breaks the fourth wall in a way. But this one, I just reckon struck all the right notes. And I loved the release structure and how they did it all. I thought it was really professional. All the interviews they did with Luke and Bug, I just really, loved their enthusiasm. And I want to support them on this one, man. I think it's great. What do you think?
Yeah, and I'm interested in this hot take on the double theme. I think it looks great. There's a big gameplay stream tonight, but yeah, it's like it hits a lot of notes. I mean, and even though the theme didn't and still isn't doing it for me, like it makes me want to watch the movie. So that's like a really cool thing. Is like hey, I actually might want to get into this theme.
Yeah.
And you never know. So really excited.
But you're not a horror guy though, are you? At all?
No, really... I'm not. But still, like, right? Like it looks cool in terms of like, like I've caught pieces of the movie, but I've never fully watched it.
Same. Yeah, I'm in the same position. It's always one of those ones that's sort of been on the periphery, but you've never had a mate that's going, you must watch this. I've never had that friend who's tried to get me to watch it, or been around a friend's house at 1 a.m. and they've made you watch it or whatever. So I've never had that, but as a result of seeing the enthusiasm and the people who are like really, really into it, I do want to revisit those movies.
Cool. Yeah. So I think there's a stream tonight at 7 Eastern Central. I'm not sure, but check it out, guys. So we have guests. They're shuffling in the back. We're going to bring them on. We've got, first up, we've got Ian Jacoby from Nudge Magazine. Ian, how you doing, man?
Hey, Ian.
I'm doing well. Good to meet you guys officially on stream. So
absolutely. So Ian's here from Nudge, like I said, and he's actually the inspiration for this episode. He did a really cool article recently. We'll be talking about it a little bit about the idea of a major manufacturer, embracing homebrew and making that kind of part of their brand strategy. He talked about American specifically, but Ian, man, we'd love to hear a little bit about you, man. What's the deal with Nudge?
Yeah, so Nudge is basically like a skateboarding magazine, but about pinball is sort of how I describe it to people. Like if you think about like Thrasher or Big Brother, those magazines from the 90s that had a little bit of attitude and were just as much about the culture as maybe like what new game is coming out. So that's Nudge, and we have an online component. I would say subscribe to our email list if you haven't done that. We have articles that come out every week that are all as interesting as the one we're talking about today. Not just by me, we have a host of writers and photographers, and we cover a lot of different stuff in pinball, and usually stuff that's kind of like not covered in other pinball media.
Yeah, really recommend you guys get on their mailing list. It's free content. They do have an amazing print magazine. I think you do it 4 times a year, right?
We do it twice a year, but
Twice a year. Okay.
yep. So we're up to issue 4 right now. I'm writing issue 5. A bunch of people are writing issue 5 right now, so that'll come out early next year, I think. And yeah, and actually, I can announce here we just started a podcast, so it's going to be me and Shane Told from the band Silverstein, who is also a big pinball fan. And so there will be a podcast now called the Nudge Cast that will come out in the next few weeks or month or so. So,
and will you be covering the same stuff as you essentially cover in the magazine? So sort of skateboarding, pinball, crossover, scene stuff.
We're going to be interviewing a lot of. Thank you. That's a great question. We're going to be interviewing like artists and entertainers a lot on how pinball intersects with their lives. So like in the first few episodes, we have Jack Danger, but we're also going to have like a Vogue photographer who also shoots for like the New York Times, who is a TD director in Los Angeles. We're going to have some comedians on who are really into pinball, and like some people who play like sports and stuff, but kind of just talking about more how it fits into their lives and how it like manifests in their, profession. So
yeah, cool. Sounds fascinating.
Cool. Yeah.
So we're going to be giving away 2 copies of Nudge later on in the show. We're going to do some homebrew trivia for you guys, so keep an eye out for that. We'll do 2 trivia questions, first to answer in the chat. We'll get a copy of Nudge. We'll check that out. So, all right, cool. So, Ian, great to have you, man. We've also got Kyle Smet. Kyle's been on the show before. Kyle, how you doing, buddy?
I'm very well. How's it going? Thanks for having me on again. I guess I didn't embarrass myself too much last time, so I appreciate it.
Not too bad. No, yeah, Kyle has done 1 homebrew that he's released publicly, and he's working on a second. Kyle, is it you've told us the title, right? We've talked about it here.
I did, but I'll tell you, Davey, I'm on the same page with you and Rob. Like, horror themes just don't really do it for me. I think they're gross.
I can tell.
Demonic killers, whatever.
You're into. You're such a sellout doing all these themes that you don't even like.
Yeah. So this is my first game, Friday the 13th, next to Jaws and Halloween, right? So I started this game about 2 years ago. I'd never coded anything. I never made a pinball, but I had owned a lot. I had fixed them, and I said, I wonder if I could make one. So I collaborated with some super awesome folks in the community. I had a build log where I kind of walked through everything that I did wrong. Here's some pitfalls. Here's some things that I did right. It was super cool. It took me about 1.5 years. I was able to bring it to TPF. It was very successful at TPF. I was just glad that it played. People seemed to be having a great time with it. I just took it to Expo. Don't make the mistake that I did and park your game next to Nick's Tony Hawk game, because man, we had a big crowd, mostly towards Nick's game, but man, that game was just fantastic. But I was proud to bring the game to Expo. Never had to lift the playfield, so I was pretty stoked that it seemed to be built pretty well, and it held up to a lot of abuse. So I talked to a lot of fans. A lot of really cool experiences. I got to talk to a lot of people who kind of gave me some insights, some tidbits, who were involved with some of the folks who were in the movies. But just quick trivia for my game. I had 6 of the original actors provide custom call outs for the game. Original art on the play fields and the back glass. For game number 2, because I'm a fan of kind of, niche 80s movies, that's the direction I'm going again. So game number 2 is Big Trouble in Little China, one of my favorites. Nice. Right? Huge box office bomb, but man, what a cult classic. So I've got some heavy hitters involved with that game. It's playing. I just coded the skill shot and added some music yesterday. I'm working on a lot of the sculpts. I got some people involved with the sculpts and stuff. So I'm just so excited to show this one off. No build log, but I'm hopeful to drop it at Expo next year. Not next to Nick's game, though.
You learn from your mistakes.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Right. Well, we had a great time for sure.
What's it going to take to get some Kurt Russell call outs on Big Trouble, man?
So I'll share with you that I have talked to some people who were in the movie, and I'm working that angle right now. I don't know if I'm going to be as successful as I was with Friday the 13th. but we'll see.
Well, different set of actors too, isn't it? You know,
Yeah,
like it's a much bigger kettle of fish.
Little different caliber, but that's okay.
Yeah. Cool,
Very
man.
cool.
Very exciting.
All right, great to have you, Kyle. And our last guest is Aaron Davis from Fast Pinball. Aaron, how you doing?
Dude, I'm doing
Rocking
great.
out.
Yeah, this is I wish we did this every afternoon, every weekend. We just get to hang out with people nerding out on pinball. So
we can if you like, Aaron. It's fine.
Dude, let's do it. But no, I'm Aaron Davis. I'm a co-founder of Fast Pinball. Dave Beecher and I started Fast a while ago because we wanted to bring some new technology into pinball, and like everything else I get involved in, I end up working on platformy, behind the scenes, foundational, opportunity creating things. And so that's fit well with the homebrew community. So I mean, Dave and I, and then with Eli Kurtz and Brian Madden making all of our documentation look incredible, we've been able to help stimulate and encourage people to get out and create great things and do that through homebrew pinball. So I hope that this conversation I can find some things to talk about, because sometimes it's hard for me to get talking, but we'll see where it goes.
And Kyle, you're using Fast tech on your new game, right?
So game number 1 was Cobra. I'm using Fast,
okay.
the Fast system for game number 2. After shameless plug for Aaron. He may not do this for everybody, but he was, let's say, just very generous with his time for me, right? Transitioning from one platform to another. So kudos to Aaron and his team.
So I'm going to ask you this question, not Aaron, because we'll be here all day. What is the Fast platform? Like, what is this stuff?
So Aaron will correct me to 100% for sure, but this is the brains of the game that talks to the computer to tell the game what to do. Tells the game when to you hit the button and a coil happens. So it is kind of all the background mechanics that lead to the magic, right? So you've got interface with a computer, something called Mission Pinball Framework, MPF. That's the software component. The hardware component, lots of different platforms. There's pros and cons across the board, but certainly Aaron's product, I think, kind of sets itself apart because it's a commercial product and it's in some commercial games right now, and I'm sure he'll talk to that. So I wanted, with game number 2, I was sensitive to have all original art. Nothing has been pulled off the shelf. This is all original. And I wanted the board features that are in commercial games along with Aaron's personality and help, right? So, yeah.
Dude, I gotta say, hold on. So I met Kyle for the first time at Expo, and I talked to everybody, and I go, so you finished a game, you got to the show, are you ready to do your next game? And he's like, man, I need a break. Like, I'm exhausted. This took everything out of me. And it took like a day and a half before he was like, man, I'm doing another one. I want to do a game with you guys. This is so awesome. So that was pretty fun.
So
very cool.
Rob mentioned this, and I'll be quiet. Rob and Davey both mentioned this. When you get there and you're surrounded by these games and you're part of this community, there's nothing else like it to bring something for other people to enjoy. And I met Aaron at TPF, and we hooked up again at Expo. So after TPF, I got home. I'm like, all right, I'm doing it.
Yeah, I'll play a little bit of clip for you guys from the show. The experience of the homebrew booth at Expo this year was really just different in so many ways. I mean, one, it was a much bigger space, but the quality of games there was just incredible. Aaron, you have been a part of a lot of these. What was different about it for you?
One of the big things was, it takes so much work to get to these shows. And what we were really trying to differentiate is not just make it some random game stuck in the corner. We wanted to make it an experience. And it was something that we had started at kind of that PinDevCon idea years ago at the Northwest show. And, Emoto jumped in with us, and we really tried to create this kind of almost carnival experience where it became a fixture on its own that you want to go see what's happening there, not necessarily just go see that one homebrew game, but just spend time here. And I think that's been the vision, because all the shows now, they want all the homebrew games to get there. But what I always push is that, you got to understand, people spend thousands of dollars to get to these shows with their games, stay in rooms, get hotels, transportation, all that stuff. And so by trying to create more of an experience of the homebrew stuff itself, we can work with shows to facilitate, like, what kind of budget do you have to try and create an experience for homebrews? And the Emoto and the Marcos crew have been really supportive with trying to work with shipping and logistics. If you can get if your game is good enough to get plugged in and turned on by anybody, you're kind of eligible for us trying to help out with some logistics. Like if you can get it on a pallet to a FedEx depot, we can help you get it to a show for real cheap. And I think that camaraderie around the event stuff, I mean, that's something that Marcos has nailed. So when they were eager to work together with us, I was like, oh, hell yeah. Like you've got the boots on the ground to make the stuff, as great as it can be.
And was it those guys that provided the infrastructure at Expo as well, or was that Stern that gave you some bits to?
That was all the Marcos stuff. I think that they've kind of extended their roadshow rigs and stuff like that to have some extra gantry and stuff. And I know that the Stern booth this year, they brought some of their own stuff to do setup. So I think there was a surplus of things that were able to be applied to the homebrew scene, because the homebrew scene looked incredible. I mean, people walked by going, what is all this? And it was kind of fun to sit back and watch people experience that in real time.
So we were talking kind of in the pre-show, like normally after Expo, things kind of start to die down as far as homebrew goes, because that's a big moment for homebrew, at least from my experience. Have you seen anything different this year in terms of like the engagement around homebrew?
Yeah, I'd say it's been huge. I mentioned, like we were chatting before, that typically like a show happens and then 4 to 6 weeks later, we get a bunch of new people buying boards and wanting to connect and stuff like that. At TPF and Southern Fried Gaming Expo, it was getting a lot shorter. And at Expo this year, there were so many people just getting to hang out and talk to all these homebrew people in real time that they were standing in front of us going, just tell me what to order here so I can be a part of this next year. And I think that, when you looked at the story of like, Jeffrey Jones and Lisa Sue, his wife, who made the Greatest Showman game, we met 2 years ago at Expo, and they kept coming. They came to talk to us because we were there and wanted to know what this homebrew thing was all about. And by the end of the show, they committed that they were going to go and sell one of their games, I think, to get some money together to build their Greatest Showman game. And Lisa Sue came into this as like, she convinced her husband to take this project on because she was going to learn how to write code. And we did some interview sessions on stage. And she talks about how she was a nurse. She is a nurse practitioner who likes to sew, and coding was something she'd never done before getting into homebrew. And she's programmed more pinball machines than I have now. So,
and you mentioned that seminar that you did at Expo, where you pulled in all of the people onto the stage. Yeah. And for me, that was like a really sort of seminal moment as well. Just to sort of. I mean, there's been other shows where the homebrew people have been on stage and stuff, but it didn't quite have the format that it did this year, where you were sort of introducing people and sort of, I guess, managing sort of the stories and the personalities and stuff. And I think it works so well because we got introduced to all these people and heard about their backstories and heard about how they got into it. And I suppose heard about their journeys. And so for me, when we sort of, did the walk around of the homebrew section later, it was with that background knowledge of these people that sort of made such a big difference for me. So I wonder if, those seminars, and people going to them sort of added to that inspiration that people felt.
It's a format that I think is kind of necessary at this point, because it got to be, it used to be a couple people on the panels. And I think when we did the TPF one last year, I swear it was like 19 guys in a row, like sitting there talking. And it was like, do you use Fusion? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Kind of thing. Yeah. And we started this at the Northwest Pinball Show where, we just started, like, I was randomly calling 2 people up out of the audience, and they'd come sit down and we'd, run through what they were working on things. And I think that, I was worried we were going to blow through the whole lineup of people in like 20 minutes and have 40 minutes to kill. And I think that what we found was we could have doubled the time. And so what we plan to do at these shows going forward, we kind of call them the making pinball, making friends talks, where it's like, we're all getting to know each other and building these things. And so I know for Expo, at least next year, like Rob Berg said, we could, take up twice the time that we did before. And I'd like to be able to do it to where, like, we can start in the beginning with some smaller interviews of just the new people coming along, but then get into some longer conversations around like some of the deeper projects that people are coming in there to see, and then leave room for some Q&A afterwards. But I mean, I appreciate the kind words on that stuff, because I mean, I always feel like I'm a clown car skidding out of control. Yeah. Like, trying
you mentioned that, but no, honestly, I thought it was such, there was some really heartfelt moments in it. And, I was able to take those moments and then meet the people afterwards and then sort of talk to them about those things and hear sort of, in more detail, sort of what got them into it. And I think they appreciated sort of people knowing that bit about them as well. It was great. It worked really well, I thought.
So yeah, the vibe has been awesome. I mean, we've seen so much, people talking about the Tony Hawk game from Nick Neitzel has been really big, and then we get an article from Nudge about some ideas with like, why aren't companies taking even more of these opportunities in house? Ian, what brought you to put that together, and tell us a little bit about your research you did on that article.
Sure. So yeah, we did an article, I guess it's probably 2 weeks ago now, called American Homebrew, Our Plan to Save American Pinball. I felt like a lot of people, and we won't like dwell on the American part of this too much, but I think a lot of pinball media that I see talking about American pinball, they're just like, oh, they suck. And they're like a joke. And I was like, well, that's not very constructive. And like, it would be kind of nice to maybe like offer some solutions. And then at the same time, I mean, I've been to Expo, I don't know, like maybe four times, I think now. I was telling someone, I'm like, this feels like my senior year of Expo. I was like slacking off and like smoking outside too much. But like there was just this, every single year we've seen the homebrew community grow, like from almost nothing. I feel like the first year there was some stuff. There was like Ed Owens and like those normal folks, but I mean there was like 40, I think, this year. Is that right? Aaron,
that was the target, was to get to 40 for the 40th, and I think it came in at like 37 to 38, somewhere close to that.
Yeah, and I mean, most of them were not just playable, but like sort of compelling games that, and some of them really even rivaling the other new games that were being released commercially. And so for me, I was like, why? Like, it's free R&D for people, and there was this model sitting there for me. I talk a lot in there about Saddle Creek Records, but there are a lot of independent record labels that, like in a lot of different genres of music, that you could point to as examples of this, but really they have crowdsourced, their bands. We had talked about this pre-recording, but Aaron had mentioned, a lot of times a homebrew machine is essentially like a demo tape. And that is exactly how I saw it. And so the strength of Saddle Creek was that they had someone with a vision running their organization who is also an artist. And so they could kind of not just create great work that would be put out by the record label, but also they were able to foster in a new generation of artists that were putting out kind of interesting work as well. And so for me, the idea was sort of like, who can we get to helm American Pinball, or whoever that would be like a Scott Denisi type, or somebody who has experience sort of bringing a game from a homebrew to the commercial market, and use them as like, okay, we're going to put out your games as like cornerstones. And also we are going to bring in like whoever is doing something hot with homebrew, give them the opportunity, give them a shot. And maybe this just like the way that it looks, I know something that's not as important to me because I'm a location player, but I think something that's important to a lot of people who own pinball machines is collectability. And so for me, it's like the strength of homebrew, right, is there are all these niche themes that people are so passionate about, but it might not be the theme that's going to be like, you can move 800 units of this thing. Maybe you can, but maybe you can't. Like for me, I love anime. And so like I brought up Ed Owens before, like the Ghost in the Shell pin, that's something that's very interesting to me. If someone ever did a Cowboy Bebop pin, that would be very interesting to me. And so I think you could do small batch runs of these games, maybe 100, maybe 200, whatever. We saw Turner Pinball essentially. They sold 100 of Ninja Eclipse. So, take whatever is really popping from these homebrews, figure out a way to sort of do 100. That's a lot. And I'm not like, I'm ignorant to some of these challenges. I'll be interested to hear what, Kyle and Aaron kind of have to say about the challenges of moving from a one-off to production. But I just think that like Saddle Creek and independent record labels in general kind of serve as a great model for what we could do. So hey, Carrie Hardy, we are talking about
Carrie. You forced yourself into the stream, Carrie. Yeah. Good work. So there's a ton of challenges with doing this. I mean, I'm curious about like what you guys know about the history of this. So Kyle, did you like see examples of people that so Kyle, did you were you inspired by anybody that kind of made their way through this path, or anybody that, I'd love to hear about who you know about that's made the path and kind of bring it to some titles people know.
Yeah, so I'll give you my unsolicited opinion. Pinball and homebrew are both, they're in the same zip code, but pinball is a business, right? Homebrew is kind of a hobby, and it's intended to be fun. Now, certainly there's some cross-pollination, right, where some manufacturers have picked up some homebrew folks, but really, a lot of those folks were either, tangentially plugged into the pinball, community, or, somehow related. So, Scott Denisi, TNA worked for Pinball Life. Keith Elwin, I think he's a pretty good pinball player. So he was already kind of plugged into that community. Ryan McQuaid made a great Sonic Spinball homebrew. He's picked up by American. Jack Danger, I think he's on a couple of YouTube videos. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of him, but he kind of dabbled in homebrew a little bit before he got picked up by Stern, and then Mark Seiden. And then Steve Condris, obviously with the Pinball Room, made the Led Zeppelin game. Super great game, great mech. And then he's a consultant, I think, for one of the startups. So I think, real quick, coming into the mainstream, actually working for a pinball manufacturer, as an outsider, as a homebrewer who really doesn't have kind of a big footprint, you are an outside commodity and an unknown, and that is a risk for a business. So, I might have come up with the greatest homebrew ever, but if I'm not a team player, if I'm not collaborative, and I don't know how the business works, and it's not a good fit for a major manufacturer. But to Ian's point, if I bring a game, the R&D is done, especially if you have art that is compelling, that connects with people, and a theme that connects with people, you may have something. So the challenge then is that now that manufacturer has to acquire the IP, likeness rights, and even if your art is stellar, the IP may not like whatever you have, and you can't go back and forth and change this and change that like it's done. So for me, at the end of the day, the so what is that if you're going to make a game, if you're going to make a homebrew game, it's got to be for you, period, dot. Whether you connect with anime, horror movies, action movies, skateboarding, whatever that may be, it's going to be in your basement. Like I was telling the folks at Expo, the worst thing that could happen making a homebrew is that you have a kick-ass game in your basement forever. That's the worst thing. The best thing is that you have some interest. The absolute best thing and the pinnacle is that you actually start to have some conversations with some of the major manufacturers. So really, it's intended to be for fun, but there's some cool things that can happen for sure.
So is the best example of this happening? Is it TNA probably, or?
So I think TNA, correct me if I'm wrong, was one of the first, and then Scott did the legwork, right? He drug his game to shows.
Yeah. And
I don't think he was out to have this be mass produced, but he made a fun game. And then people, when they walked up, they just got it, right? There was no pre-existing IP. Scott had this crazy idea of, you are this time traveler, you're going to the future, and you're going to blow up the world, okay? You have to kill all these 9 reactors, go. And people got it. And then you hit the start button, and you can you sense that game through the flipper buttons. And you know exactly what to do as you're playing it. And I think that's why he was successful, is because he had this idea and it just worked. So, certainly with the other manufacturers, Keith Elwin, made his homebrew. He just knows how a game works. You've got the kinetic satisfaction and just everything that kind of are those, Elwin trademarks. He knows what works and what doesn't work, and he's able to take just decades of experience and put that in a game. And again, a lot of homebrewers may like this shot and that shot and kind of kludge stuff together like I did. I like Steve Ritchie, I like Borg, and I kind of incorporated a lot of those things with my game. And other homebrew makers kind of, do something similar. Jack was inspired by Gottlieb's weirdness. Let's make pinball weird again. And he certainly did it. You saw X-Men. My gosh. But you walk up to those games, like you see Foo Fighters, you see X-Men, you're like, that is bananas, but I get it. It's just fun.
Yeah, Aaron, do you find yourself like having to walk a fine line in terms of how you talk to people about what their project is versus like just a pure passion project versus like trying to even present it on some kind of level like, hey, this might be worth picking up?
I think that like I look at everything from like I like to extract potential in something. It's like, how can you take whatever you're doing and let it, carry on and go as far as it can go, And I think that that's one of the things that like, there's a lot of effort that we're trying to do as FAST to say like, unless you've got a compelling reason to do otherwise, like follow the examples that we say as far as like build your system up electrically, following the guidance and stuff that we do, because this is the same guidance that we're telling like commercial manufacturers to do. So that's one of the areas that like anytime you've got a homebrew game, a lot of the anxiety around a homebrew game from the idea of taking that to production is, just because you can play the game does not mean it's done and does not mean it's production ready. And so I think for a lot of companies, looking at like, how do we take this game that people enjoyed playing and then get it to a finished releasable product? There's a lot more behind the scenes that it takes to do that. So what we always just try to do is to encourage people to say like, if you have, if you've got an IP that you want to work with, they'll talk about how like sometimes it's harder to work with certain IPs if you've been trotting around a project in the public already. And so there's some of the things on that side of things also, but you'll also see now that like, the amount of effort it takes to put into making an original theme with great artwork and stuff. And, we were just talking about TNA, for example. I mean, all original, like totally no issue whatsoever in getting that produced if that opportunity presented itself. I mean, at Expo this year, I mean, there was like Tattoo Mystique by Brian Cox, all original design, 8-Ball Beyond from Sean Irby. Again, like, he's a great player, can make a great game. These are IPs that if somebody said, I want to make that game, there is no IP restriction as far as actually producing that stuff. So, I tend to encourage people like, one, like make a game around something that you're inspired to like use every extra waking hour that you've got to put into that game, So if that is an existing IP, like run with it, because not a lot of people are aspiring to go from their homebrew to a commercial product, But if you have interest in making something creative, when you're working with original artists and stuff like that, original musicians and things like that, makes it easier for, like I love Ian's example of the Saddle Creek thing. The one I always use, this is your indie throwback stuff, but Barsuk Records was our local like indie label, and the grown up indie label was like Sub Pop, and so it was the same kind of thing. Like if you can build something that's cool and somebody goes, like if we put some effort behind this, like we could make a small run of these games. I do know that like some of the manufacturers out there are interested in the idea of smaller run games. But what they don't have the budget and time and bandwidth for is going, cool, you've got this demo tape that you brought us here. Now, what are you doing electrically? What are you doing software wise? How releasable is this game? Because for the most part, every pinball company's got plenty of designers, so they're not going to be like, great, here's a home brewer, come work for us. That's a tall ask, for that next step. But what we see is that like, if you've got a pinball company that's manufacturing games, those production lines got to keep moving. And so if there is a cool, fun project to pick up and they can put a reasonable amount of time and energy in finishing that game, sourcing certain unique components, that's much more attractive if they're not having to go like, what are we doing electrically? I mean, obviously from the FAST standpoint, we can say like, if you build a game on FAST, there's commercial manufacturers that are following those same specs. So if they go, well, shoot, like there's this cool original theme that we could make 250 of and fill a hole this fall, that leap is a lot smaller there. So I tend to, anyone who aspires to like make their game, I always highlight the gains that exist by not using licensed properties that they don't have control over, or even find licenses that are like friendly, look at like indie video game studios or indie filmmakers and stuff like that, who might just think it's cool to get a pin existing. But anything that's going to make that stuff less of a barrier of entry for a manufacturer is going to make it more likely for your game to actually get picked up.
So talking a little bit about that barrier of entry. So the one manufacturer that comes to mind, obviously, is Barrels of Fun, because they're using the FAST system for all their games at the moment. So it's going to be a lot easier for them to absorb a homebrew game potentially than it would be for, say, American Pinball, who are on a completely different system, who would have to, at a minimum, you'd have to, make sure all the hardware sort of is ported over, but then we've got a software port that is required as well. So for Barrels of Fun, are they using MPF or are they using something else?
Eric Prepke wrote their own framework using a Godot game engine, which is popular in like, video game creation and stuff. And in fact, like the Mission Pinball framework, the open source Python framework now uses the Godot game engine for all its media presentation. So all the on-screen graphics and stuff like that. But I think that's one of the areas too, that like, from the electronic standpoint side of things, like, whether you're using like, NPF or Godot or Unity or Unreal, like all of those kinds of systems, or like a home, you wrote a system from scratch, all that stuff's pretty easy to port and talk, or you just talk directly to our hardware with. So what a company is going to look at, so another barrier of entry is going to be the long-term support of that product. So if you wrote a game framework, and I guess that's why I'll suggest too, like, don't worry about creating the absolute 100% finished game, like, code wise and stuff like that, because you might find that like porting that to a different framework or something like that might be necessary for that opportunity to carry on. But yeah.
So what would be harder from the point of view of shopping that around the manufacturers? Would it be the hardware, or would it be the software that would be the biggest barrier of entry for somebody who wanted to produce for a manufacturer?
I'd say like, hardware wise, like, if you're using FAST and that company uses FAST, I mean, like Pejoretti Gaming, the Euro Pinball Corp over in Europe, in the same boat, they're the Funhouse remakes and other projects coming along are using the same platform.
That's right. Yeah. I didn't think of them. Yeah.
But the software side of things, I mean, like, I'm sure there's software people in the group here that like understand that like, just because something works doesn't mean it's like stable and commercially ready and stuff like that too. So that is one of those areas when we talk about kind of the black hole of picking up a project, is like, how brittle is this code base, And so I think those are those areas too that like, nobody wants to be caught blindsided with these things. And that's why, like, we were talking pre-show just about like, treat these homebrews like a demo tape. This is not intended to be on a silver platter ready to be released. It should be something that inspires a connection to be made, and the conversations around how do we take this to a next step. Yeah.
And when American picked up Legends of Valhalla, that was on a different framework than what American was using. And I think I saw that Josh Kugler had spent some time working that framework to another. So I don't think it's a huge lift, right? If you know what you're doing and you can kind of talk to the intricacies of that. So really, hardware and software switches are not insurmountable,
Right.
Are you guys, how familiar are you guys with the Kill Bill project where they made 4 or 5 Kill Bills? Are you guys familiar with that one?
I saw one of the games, yeah.
I'm aware of it.
So I guess
I've never seen it in person.
Yeah, so I guess it was a retheme of World Cup. And the reason I bring it up is because one thing that I might be focused on is like, how do I fund my next project, right? Because you get into it, it's going to be really expensive. Like, how do you segue that to the next project? So I thought what they did was really interesting. And I don't know how successful it was, because I know they had 5 of these. Each one was kind of themed against a different character. They actually reached out to us about maybe doing a topper for it. That's why I know a little bit about it. But I thought it was a really cool idea in the sense of, how do you fund the next project? Maybe you create a schematic for someone to kind of build it on their own, or kind of work with them to do that. Maybe not have to worry about the licensing so much, because, you're just kind of doing it in a bit of a club type environment. But have you guys seen people doing anything like where they're just trying to get a couple of them going around a particular theme?
I would offer that if you're working with an existing IP that you don't own or have a license for, you need to be very careful how you pull in funds. So how did I fund my game? I sold another game to pay for the art for my next game. For this game, I have taken no money. People offered to buy the translite, this and that. I have not made one thin nickel for my game. Same with the next game. So there are certainly creative ways, I think, to crowdsource or fund a game. And I've seen people, I think I saw a guy do a Kickstarter once. Hey, I want to build this game, throw me some money. And it was not successful because why would I do that? So are there creative ways to do that? Sure. But really, Homebrew is a passion project. And if you want to bring a fully fleshed out artistic thing for you to put out in public, that you're flipping the bill.
How about, have you seen any cases where like someone developed like a special shot or a special piece of technology that's been picked up by any companies? Is there any cases of that, Aaron, that you've seen?
I mean, there's the legendary Denisi lock, which like everybody knows now, there are some unique things that tend to come up, and they're usually around kind of that marquee mech, that thing that people want to make that now exists that everyone says like, oh, you copied this from so-and-so. And I usually try to use the word inspired by. Like, if I saw something that you did in a cool format and it inspired me to go and augment that a little bit and create something unique in my game. You see a lot of that kind of stuff kind of carry on from, game to game to game. But I think that, sometimes people will aspire to like create a mechanism and then, go and try to patent that as an effort to try and, secure the designs and generate revenue and stuff like that potentially from that. I usually push back and say, just because you have a patent doesn't mean you get money out of it. It means you have the opportunity to spend money to defend it. And so I think that that's one of those areas that, as soon as you get really focused on trying to protect something that you've created as a one-off random person by themselves, that may be something that some people might say like, this might be too complicated to get associated with. So I would definitely like consider thoroughly whether that's something that you want to make the focus of the first project that you made. Now that being said, like, I do think that if you create something great in the game that people love and becomes iconic, I mean, that's how you get the Denisi lock. I mean, we all use that term freely because we know that, and it's a recognizable thing. Now, maybe in the short term, that's not generating additional revenue, but it made Scott a household name in pinball and created those opportunities and stuff.
And I think if everybody created patents for every new invention in pinball, then we wouldn't have pinball, I mean, so many of what we see in pinball machines now is there because somebody had the great idea to put a ramp in a game, and then everybody was like, oh, that's a good idea. And then ramps are now ubiquitous in pinball. Like if somebody had thought to patent that, then, we wouldn't grow and we wouldn't evolve.
I just want...
Sorry, go ahead, Ian.
No, well, I was just going to say that I was noticing in chat that Kyle funds his homebrew the same way that I fund Nudge with credit card debt. So, and
who needs two kidneys?
In keeping with that, if anyone wants to do like a Nudge theme for their homebrew, just know that I will bring the full extent of the law. I will take you for everything that you own.
So speaking of the law, so almost all homebrew projects are for the passion, and the big payoff is letting people see it and letting people play it, and that's the way it should continue to be. But there are risks to even doing that, and you could risk that, and we've seen that in a couple cases. Even with this last expo, we had it with we had it with the Harry Potter situation with JJP. And we had another one with the circus game as well, where like these people put in all this work and they couldn't even show it on the floor because they got told not to do that. So what do people need to be thinking about so that they don't find themselves like not being able to celebrate their hard work?
It's tough because I think that, as we heard all weekend there around some of those projects that you mentioned, that like, everybody's their armchair attorney who goes, this is fan art, I'm allowed to do this, all that kind of stuff. And, sometimes there's other factors in play, that other people are looking at it from their perspective, thinking I got to protect this and this is my IP, I got to defend and that kind of stuff. I think that, I think that if you feel the hint of that thought crossing your mind with the project that you're working on, you just got to, I always look at things as like, what's the worst this could possibly go? And somebody just straight up says no and makes an effort to stop your project. I mean, that could happen. Now, on the other hand, like sometimes just a conversation can make the difference. Hey, I know this is a project that, you guys have the IP for, and this is something that means a lot to me. I think it would be a great demonstration of skills and abilities. And this is my goal with this, is just to make an N of one, like one version of this that I could bring to life as a showcase of my mechanical and software skills. And that conversation might be enough to make people go, okay, yeah, fine. If you're not selling it and it's just, you're making one of these for you, go for it, And I think that that's the kind of thing that, again, like I said, like looking for the worst case scenario and decide like, do you really want to go up against an IP holder on something, or is it worth a conversation? That's the kind of stuff I always try to encourage people to really think hard about, because I mean, if you spend a bunch of money on a custom artwork for a playfield and somebody shuts it down, like you just wasted a bunch of money for a piece of wall art that's in your garage.
I think the reason why the Harry Potter one got shut down is because it had a kick-ass Quidditch field that is no way going to be in the final JJP game.
The scuttlebutt was that JJP would be their game would be compared to the homebrew Harry Potter, which, as you saw, was just next level. But
it was next level, multiple levels, in fact, as it turns out.
And IPs are different. As Aaron mentioned, Harry Potter is this juggernaut. Friday the 13th. Okay, that was cool when I was 12, 40 years ago, whatever. So not a lot of resistance there, right? But again, I was cautious to pick a property that for a game that I knew would never get made. So Friday the 13th, the rights are all over the place. It's a New Line, Paramount. It's all over different. So one guy owns the rights to The Mask. One guy owns the rights to the name Friday the 13th. One guy owns the rights to the name Jason. The game is never going to happen. So that was something that was important to me, was to create something that was going to be unique. Now, certainly like Steve, when he made Led Zeppelin, he's working hard in this game, and here comes Stern. Woohoo! But that doesn't take away from the game that he's got, right? It's still special, and it's encouraging to me that he didn't have an issue bringing that game to the floor, because you're not taking away capital from Stern, right? They're there for the fans, and we're all kind of a community, but not everybody's like that, and some IPs are every IP is going to be different. Even if you make an IP that you think might not go anywhere, you never know what's going to happen.
Agree.
All right. Well, we promised to give away a couple copies of Nudge to you folks. So we've come up with a little bit of homebrew trivia for the fans out there. Kyle, you want to start us off? So the way this is going to work, I'll let you kind of think about the question you want to ask. The way it's going to work is he's going to ask a question. It's going to be a pretty simple answer. And whoever answers the question first in the chat, they will contact you and get you set up with a copy of Nudge. So Kyle, what's up? What do you got?
So I'll do the question we talked about in the prep. So Total Nuclear Annihilation by Scott Danesi, famous for the Danesi lock. The original title for that game was not Total Nuclear Annihilation. What was the original title for TNA?
Do we have a drum roll sound effect?
We need some music here. The original title for TNA. Anyone?
Was it Ballbuster?
Rick and Morty. That might be a decent guess. Total Annihilation. Is that
so while we wait for people's answers on this question, can I get everybody's? Look, we've already got it. We've already got. But can I get everybody's? What's? Yeah, Jimmy got it. What's everybody's top score? Not in terms of score, but in terms of how many reactors have you blown up on TNA? Does everybody know that? I'm only 3.
I think I'm 3, maybe. Yeah.
I think 3 sticks in my mind too.
Yeah.
I had an epic game on 10 ball. You don't need the glass, right, to really kind of explore the game. Things to picture ass.
Jesus, Kyle. Jesus, man.
You're
making a mockery of my question.
Sorry, I guess I'm only
between Jimmy and Carrie, we might have to up the challenge of these questions. So Aaron, you're up next. Jimmy with pin lights took the first one. What do you got for us?
All right, so we talked a little bit in the show about wanting to someday take your game and go on and work at a pinball company and stuff. So we all know the story of Keith Elwin and his homebrew game that got him the attention of Stern Pinball, and they eventually picked up his game and changed the theme on it to Iron Maiden. What was the original theme that he released his homebrew as?
I'm so bummed that this wasn't a theme.
It would be so good, right?
Did anybody play it in its original form? Like, is anybody sort of that era pinball? Because I'm not. Like, that was before my time.
I think that I did. At least I know for sure I saw it at the Banning Arcade Expo in Southern California. I remember it being present at some show, and I think it had to be that one.
Yeah.
So all right. So Nick takes it. Nice.
Well done, Nick.
And we'll just say that this segment was sponsored by Nudge Magazine, because to my knowledge, these schmoes aren't paying me to do this. So like, this is coming from me. I'm paying.
I just happen to have this.
I don't know if these guys brought anything that they were forced to give up, but I will just I was like, am I gonna get something? Can I talk about what it is? But no, that's fine. Yeah, enjoy those magazines, guys. Courtesy of me. So
Can I have a
Thank
free
you,
magazine
Ian.
too, Ian?
Yeah, I thought we were getting one just by
Just to-
participating here.
Just to be clear,
no. Magazines are really successful. It's super easy to make money at them. Like, thanks so much,
All that
guys.
physical
Because,
good. Oh, yeah.
for every Bells and Chimes community, every single person's always like, "Hey, like free magazines." You're like, yeah, sure. So listen, guys, if you're watching this and you don't have one, you actually can't buy them. They're not available on the website. But in the next month, if you go to nudgepinball.com, we are going to have restocks of every single issue, 1 through 4. You can get them all. And they're not going to come from me, so they'll come on time. And you're going to love them. So
Ian, is that the best way? Like, so obviously you release 2 times a year.
Mm-hmm.
What's the best way to get your magazine then? Is it by subscription, or how do you do it?
So we're just moving to a one-off model. They are rather expensive, so I will say that you're going to have to get over paying $20 for a magazine, but I will say they're worth it. They come on very high quality paper. They're full of crazy art. You get all kinds of like extra stuff in there. But yeah, if you go to nudgepinball.com and just go to our store, that's the best way. Honestly, though, I would just encourage people, and this is the last time I'll plug. I'm sorry I was so obnoxious.
No, man, go for it. Go for it.
But if you sign up for our email list, that is the best way, and you'll always know when we're restocked. And I'm this obnoxious on the email too. So. Yeah, that's fun.
Well, just to be clear, the In Before the Lock is paying for those magazines.
No, they're not. No, they're not. They aren't, guys.
I already sent the money. You can't reject PayPal payments. I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way.
This is just how I wanted the show to go.
I thought of this rant last night as I was falling asleep, and I was like, I'm gonna just try it. So I think it actually went pretty.
So glad you did. So glad you did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, getting to support these projects. I mean, like the artisan, small scale, like creative stuff. I mean, we talked pre-show. It's like those indie like DIY days of like, our youth. I think that really, it's interesting meeting people like yourself, and I've met a lot of others who were like into that era of like when we were, just getting out of high school, going off to college and stuff like that, like out in the world and finding others that go and create things and make things and support bands and artists and all that kind of stuff. And like there's so many analogies in the pinball space to that that I've gotten to almost like rekindle my late 90s early 2000 days with the same kind of camaraderie and stuff like that around these projects. So we used to always have the rule that we don't buy drinks until we bought at least something from the touring band's merch table. Because that's how they get to the next city, So if you bought their 7-inch, then go buy a beer and then buy them a beer at the same time,
And so, like that. Homebrew feels exactly that. It is that culture, and so that's what I mean. We tap into that culture for Nudge. Tanner Petch, who did Trashland, is one of our main illustrators.
Yeah,
and so
House of Flesh and Blood.
Those guys, exactly. Yeah, so it's just like it's a very infectious spirit that is in Homebrew.
So let's talk a little bit about where to start, like both from a resource perspective, but also whether it's a retheme or something from scratch. Curious kind of your guys' recommendations on where to really get into this. Let's say I own a bunch of pinball machines. I know how to work on them. We're kind of past that phase. Now I want to do a project.
It depends what you want to do. And that's what's great about Homebrew is this is your baby. You can do it by yourself, so to speak. You can have a group of friends as a team. And that's probably one of the first questions right after, okay, what's the theme, right? Everybody wants to know what the theme is. Okay, are we going to do an original layout or a retheme? And there's pros and cons across the board, but I'll tell you that an original layout will require quite a bit of effort and trial and error to get it right. If you have a retheme, you kind of have a layout that's already fleshed out. The geometry's there. Now it's just a matter of art, code, and kind of integrating that theme. But for anybody who's kind of thinking about it, certainly don't be shy or apprehensive if you don't know how to code, if you don't know how to put together a cabinet, if you don't none of us were born with that knowledge. When I started, I had no idea how to do any of that. But the great news with Homebrew, and Aaron can attest to this, is that the community is just effing awesome. We are there to help you. I still ask questions all the time. I'm like, I don't know how to do this. And I would offer that the reason that Homebrew, I think, is getting elevated so much is because of the resources that we have. Look at the software that wasn't available 5 years ago. Look at the hardware that guys, on the FAST team, Cobra, P3, all that kind of stuff. You can buy cabinet kits now. Mechs are all over the place. Pinball Life, Marco. I mean, everything is there, and the resources are there, and the tools to use those resources like Slack and Discord and Pinside, just to be able to communicate. So the first hurdle is, okay, am I going to do this? The answer is yes. Okay. Oh, cool. What's the theme? And then how am I going to go from there? And it's really dealer's choice. And the cool news is there's no time frame. You take as much or as little time as you want, keep it in your house forever, take it to a show, finished, unfinished. The community is there to help you.
I think that everybody's like hard. I would say that everyone's hard part is different. You might look at a game and be like, man, I write code all day long. That's easy. But bending metal or cutting wood, like, who are these wizards that know how to do this thing? And I think that, anytime you can kind of collaborate with others, that does reduce the things that you're taking on and learning at the same time. So anytime you can kind of minimize a little bit the number of things you're taking on and trying to learn and get, reasonably good at all at once, the better. So not only like laying out play fields, that's a whole geometry engineering exercise that takes a lot. And that's why we've seen a lot of success with games like The Greatest Showman or like Saw and stuff like that have come to the shows as like rethemes of games that we already like to shoot, And so if you take the fact that like they were using existing playfield layouts for the most part, there's still a ton of work that it takes to make those projects, and it's a lot. I mean, the whole Saw team, I think, is made up of like 4 different people, like doing, sound engineering, software design, like all that kind of stuff. And those games look really great. I love like how, I think it was at TPF last time, or maybe the time before, it's all running together, but I loved how we were wrapping up the talk that we did, and Ernie Silverberg jumps in and is like, hold on a sec, we've got you all wound up and excited about Homebrew, but you're going to come and see these games, and these games are like full dress, like amazing. It was the first time that someone had to disclaim the fact that the Homebrew games look so good that you shouldn't be intimidated by how good they look. And like Kyle said, like getting your game to a show, I mean, that's like a milestone to get to. It's like, you've got it barely flipping, and you got a couple little modes and stuff like that, and it's your whitewood that's got drill holes all over it. It's like, bring it, because everybody there has been there, and they're going to go, dude, look at this. Like, oh, you used the wrong ball guide here. I did that too, and then you see the adjustments that get made. There's just that kind of camaraderie around that stuff. But, I think that finding the thing that's, I guess the inspiration that got you to think you wanted to make pinball is the thing that I'm always, most attentive to like try and help people keep the momentum up and stuff. And I think that's where like finding the communities that are going to be supportive of you. And frankly, if you don't have a community yet, but Homebrew is interesting, just bring it to a show and you'll have like 9 new best friends before you go home. And that's really the fun of these shows. I always try to like pay attention to capturing pictures of people playing people's games. And then I share it back with them to be like, look at this. Like Brian Cox had his Tattoo Mystique game there that had 3 buttons on it. And there was a group of women that were playing split flipper, but each, there was 3 people playing it, and I said, could I take your picture and send it to the designer? Because we get such a kick out of that. And they all kind of posed for it and stuff like that. And it was really cool to like share that back with the people who they couldn't even make it to the show, but they wanted their games to be there and be experienced and stuff. So just the barrier of entry to get in the club of Homebrew is just one step beyond like, I want to do it. Like just drill something into wood and show up and you're in the club. And we're glad you're there.
Yeah, checking out these Homebrew games is definitely a major reason I recommend people check out some of these shows, especially Expo. If you haven't been to a show, like you're going to experience some stuff in pinball that you didn't know even could exist, because these guys are taking the risks. Is there other shows, Aaron, that have a decent Homebrew scene like Expo? Is there other ways for people to go if they're not in that area?
Like our anchor shows that we've been going to is Southern Fried Gaming Expo, Pinball Expo in Chicago, the Texas Pinball Festival, and then our Northwest Pinball Show that's in June up here. And our local show has been like easier for us to kind of bring a deeper experience to, and we're trying to do more, because it's kind of a trek to get up to the basically the Seattle area for a show, but we're going to try and do some things that create greater incentive to make the effort to come up. We were talking about ideas for next year to say something like, maybe we book like 30-minute time slots where it's like, do you want Aaron and Dave and Eli to poke around in your game and tell you where you wired something ridiculous and how to fix it, like just to give like some in-depth feedback on stuff that's harder to get like, remotely and things like that. Trying to create like, each show has kind of its own, regional like appeal because, Expo is good because it's very central. Everyone can get there pretty easily. And the one shows that I don't have an anchor show for yet is the Northeast area. And I know that like, Lin-Manuel and like Aaron and those guys up there, like, they keep saying, I get these drunken phone calls while they're at those shows being like, woo, we're like drinking and soldering. You should be here. And my wife's like, who are you talking to? But I think that, like anytime you can get to a show, I mean, basically you get 2 or 3 people together and now people are at the show. And I think that, the show that Kyle and I met at TPF, we were trying to work on getting more homebrew games there. And it kind of built on itself where it was like, oh, so-and-so is coming. Well, shoot, then I'll come. And if I'm coming, I'll pick up this other guy's game because I know he can fly in. It starts to build on itself. So, even if you do have a local show that has no homebrew scene, like start to look around. I mean, I think that everybody needs the slightest like bit of encouragement to throw their stuff in their van and drive out to a show, so you can really start to build those like little pockets of interest and enthusiasm.
Can I just ask, Aaron, when is the Northwest Pinball Expo?
It's usually usually the first weekend in June, somewhere right around there. It's nwpinballshow.com has the address on it, but we've been getting more and more people coming up to it because I mean June in the Northwest is gorgeous. School's out for the end of the year. We get people kind of road tripping up. They'll go to the show and then travel around the region and stuff like that. But like, I mean, if anybody has the slightest interest in coming out, we've been trying to work together with people to like help with logistics whenever possible to get up there. But also like when you get people together, like to do panel talks and we do meetups. Like one of the things that we do is we do a homebrew meetup where we put all the games on trucks and dollies and drive them over to the hotel next door. And we, bring a bar over, we bring drink tickets and stuff like that and have an after hours kind of thing where it's not the noise of the show floor, but that way we can, bring designers and stuff like that over that can actually have conversations about these games. And that's something that has been very popular. I thought it was just going to be too much work. And next year, the following year, everyone's like, where's the cart? Like, let's get rolled over and go over and do that event again. So, well, yeah, definitely come out.
If you need like a pallet of free Nudge magazines, just hit me up. And,
okay. That would be great.
Well, awesome. Yeah,
let's do it.
Cool. Well, we were all at Expo. To wrap things up today, I'd just love to kind of do a little bit of a roundtable on what was that like one shot or that one experience you had in homebrew that you loved. Again, these guys make some amazing stuff, and everyone needs to get a chance to experience it. But I'm curious if you guys had the kind of one thing that really stood out to you from the show.
Right away, for me, I think about Boys Night Out and how much that has developed into what it is now and how great it is. I'm sorry, Aaron, tell me who the designer is of that game.
That's Joel.
Joel. Yeah, it's
Joel Kaiser. Sorry.
Yes, it is such a great. It's based on an indie movie that he also made, and the artwork is phenomenal. It's the only evidence of some pretty hardcore drug use that I've ever seen, featured prominently on a playfield. That's as specific as I'll get for YouTube. But it's also just a really fun game. Like he told me, I vibed on that game. Probably I played 5 or 6 games in a row. Saturday night, I was so tired, and Mike from Flipper Room and a couple other people, we were like, let's just go. Like, let's try this thing out. And it was just such a fun. I mean, I legit had a good time. It's so funny that we don't have to grade on a curve anymore for homebrews. They've gotten so good that you're like, this isn't good for homebrew. It's good. So like that was a game where it's like, there's some it's fun. There are all kinds of modes. I think I ended up crashing it because you can just start unlimited modes basically. But yeah, that was a highlight for me. Absolutely.
Well, my favorite, and I love have seen this develop, is Trashlands. I think is it Tanner that made that?
Yeah, Tanner.
If I think about a game that if I wanted to buy like a one-off of something, it would be that because I love Rube Goldberg's, which are the contraptions like Mousetrap, and I feel like that game captures a Rube Goldberg differently than any other pinball. machines I've been a part of. I'm also generally just don't like weird form factors for pinball machines, but like that one just makes sense for me. Like I feel like that game would actually not work if it weren't in a weird form factor in an oddly shaped cabinet. So definitely shout out to him. And I love that he just keeps going at it. Like it's like I asked him, I was like, did you basically like start this over from scratch? Because it looks like it's all new. And he's like, well, not 100%, but he's just like keeps going at it. So definitely a huge shout out to him. Kyle, do you have any? Davey's like he's just coming in and out. We don't know what's going on with him. He's done.
My mic's still here. It's just my mic's still here, so I can still give you guys shit. It's just my camera. I can't like, do this. Shall I quickly go then while my camera's still working?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so for me, it's the 8-ball.
I don't care.
Shut up, man! It's gonna shut off soon. It's the battery. For me, it's the 8-ball Beyond shot, which wasn't at Expo per se, but it was at TPF, wasn't it? And I've talked about it a lot on the show before, but essentially you can lock a ball behind a drop down target in multi-ball, and then hit that same drop target to knock the ball up, and then hit both balls sort of into a scoop. It's like a pull trick shot. And he was talking me through it. And sorry, I don't remember people's names very well, but Aaron, you might be able to help me out who the 8-ball Beyond designer was.
Sean.
Sean.
And he was Sean, and I met him and had a big chat with him. Lovely guy, and he was trying to talk because I'd sort of seen this on video. I think there was a GIF, like an animated GIF, sort of showing the trick shot in all its glory, and so I was like, "This is what I want to do in the game." So he was sort of talking me through it during multi-ball, telling me how to do it, and I sort of got to the point of knocking down the drop target and trying to hit the trick shot, but I didn't actually nail it. So yeah, for me, that's I thought that was just such a brilliant idea, so simple. It's almost like it should have been done before, but it never has been. And it's not some standout mech or some really complicated thing. It's just a really great idea executed really brilliantly and fits really well within the theme of that game. That's brilliant.
Cool. Kyle, any favorite takeaways?
Yeah, so my takeaway from this chat, appreciate you having me on, is regardless of what Aaron says, kids, soldering and drinking do not mix.
They mix, but you might get burned or miss something. But
yeah, and then drinking and really anything pinball related, like fixing the game, don't mix. Drinking and playing, sure. My biggest takeaway from Expo, and everybody says this, is the folks that I got to hang out with. Right, it was a treat hanging out with Nick and Allison at the booth. Right, Rob, it was great hanging out with you. I got to meet the folks that I was collaborating with and talking with for almost a year. Right, Kyle, Mike Mandola, who did the Overwatch game. I mean, just to be able to see it, like, dude, you're just so excited. Everybody loves to show off their game and they want to see your game. And it's just, that's the energy, that's the buzz that people walk away from and they go, shit, I want to be involved with that. That, I think, is why Aaron took so many orders. People catch that vibe. They feel that and they want to be a part of it. The hard part comes with the work, right? And the lull after the show where you've got this box of wires and boards and you know what to do and you're pulling out whatever little hair you have left. But getting to that show, connecting with the people that have helped you and you've helped them is just something else. It's super cool.
Definitely. A lot of work to drag these bad boys all across the country, but it sounds like there's some good spots to hit these up. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. This has been a ton of fun. I mean, there's again, I'll ask one more time. Is there any what's the best? Is it Facebook groups? Is it Pinside? Where's the best place to start meeting some of these folks?
Go to shows.
Go to shows,
man.
Yeah, I agree.
Awesome.
There's no armchair quarterbacks in the homebrew scene. Like you brought something there. You'll see all these people are just like all of us, and they're excited about a project that's giving us something to do, a reason to wake up and buy some new tools and learn some new things and share it with people. So it's good stuff.
Absolutely. All right. Well, everyone, again, thank you so much. Guys, check them out. We got a couple of videos on the In Before the Lock from the Homebrew section, as well as an interview with Aaron with FAST. Check out Nudge Magazine. Again, the newsletter It's free. It's great content, and pick up some magazines along the way. Ian, thanks for not donating magazines to our folks here, and to our winners, Carrie, and to Jimmy. We'll be in touch. So, guys, signing off. Have a great night, and we will see you soon.